Most people think colon cancer begins with bad luck, a hidden genetic mutation, a family curse passed down through generations. But what if the real warning signs are already living inside your body years before any doctor ever finds a tumor? Right now, inside your intestines, trillions of microscopic organisms are fighting for control. Some protect you. Others slowly damage the lining of your colon, day after day, month after month, creating the perfect environment for cancer to grow silently in the background. And, according to emerging research, one of the most powerful weapons against that process may already be sitting in your kitchen cabinet. Imagine your large intestine like a massive underground city. Every inch of it is crowded with bacteria competing for space, nutrients, and survival. Under healthy conditions, beneficial bacteria help digest food, control inflammation, strengthen immunity, and even help destroy dangerous abnormal cells before they become a threat. But when harmful bacteria begin taking over, everything changes. Certain strains release toxic compounds directly into the intestinal wall. They irritate the tissue continuously, creating chronic low-grade inflammation that never fully shuts off. And over time, that constant irritation damages DNA, weakens immune surveillance, and creates fertile ground for cancer development. What makes this frightening is that colon cancer rarely appears suddenly. Long before any tumor forms, the internal environment of the gut begins changing. Researchers now believe that some harmful bacteria actively help cancer cells survive by manipulating the immune system itself. Instead of allowing immune cells to attack abnormal growths, these microbes create chemical signals that suppress the body's natural defense mechanisms. In simple terms, the dangerous bacteria convince your immune system to stay quiet, while abnormal cells multiply unnoticed. The encouraging part is this: your microbiome is not fixed. The balance of bacteria inside your gut can shift surprisingly fast depending on what you eat. In some studies, meaningful microbial changes occurred within just 24 to 48 hours. That means every meal either strengthens the harmful organisms or supports the protective ones. And one specific spice appears to influence that balance in an extraordinary way. For years, most conversations about colon cancer prevention focused on colonoscopies, genetics, processed meat consumption, smoking, and family history. Those factors still matter, but modern microbiome science has completely expanded our understanding of risk. Researchers are now discovering that two people with similar lifestyles can have dramatically different cancer risk depending on the bacterial ecosystems inside their digestive tract. The foods we repeatedly consume don't just feed us. They feed entire microbial populations that either protect the colon or quietly damage it over time. That realization has transformed how many researchers think about prevention. Because when scientists began closely studying the connection between gut bacteria and colorectal cancer, they noticed several recurring bacterial species showing up repeatedly in tumor tissue. One of the most concerning was Fusobacterium nucleatum, a bacteria strongly associated with inflammation, immune suppression, and tumor progression. Other harmful strains were also linked to cellular damage and chronic intestinal irritation. The more these bacteria multiplied, the more dangerous the internal environment became. But then researchers noticed something equally fascinating. Certain natural compounds appeared capable of suppressing those harmful bacteria while supporting beneficial strains at the same time. And among all of them, one stood out repeatedly in laboratory studies, microbiome analysis, and cancer research. That compound is curcumin, the active ingredient found in turmeric. Now, the moment many people hear turmeric, they immediately dismiss it as another trendy wellness ingredient. Maybe they've seen it in smoothies, teas, or supplement ads online. But what most people never realize is that curcumin has been investigated in thousands of peer-reviewed scientific studies. Researchers have examined its effects on inflammation, bacterial growth, immune regulation, oxidative stress, and even cancer cell survival itself. This is not simply a social media health trend. The science behind it is far deeper than most people understand. What makes curcumin especially unique is the way it behaves inside the gut. Most antimicrobial compounds act like bombs. They destroy everything indiscriminately, including beneficial bacteria the body desperately needs. But curcumin behaves differently. Instead of wiping out the entire bacterial ecosystem, it appears to selectively interfere with harmful strains while helping beneficial bacteria grow stronger. In other words, it doesn't just attack the problem, It helps rebuild the body's defenses simultaneously. And that is where this story becomes far more powerful than most people expect. Because curcumin's effects don't stop at bacteria alone. Once scientists began studying what it does at the cellular level inside the colon itself, they uncovered something even more surprising, a completely separate mechanism that may interfere directly with cancer cell survival and tumor growth. Here's the part that changes everything most people think they know about: cancer growth. A tumor cannot survive on its own. No matter how aggressive a cancer cell becomes, it still has one major weakness. It needs a constant blood supply. Without oxygen and nutrients, even dangerous cancer cells eventually die. That means before a tumor can grow larger than the tip of a pen, it has to convince the body to build brand new blood vessels around it. And according to modern cancer biology, this is one of the most critical turning points in the entire disease process. Think about it like a criminal organization trying to expand inside a city. At first, it stays small and hidden, but eventually it needs roads, supply chains, transportation, and infrastructure. Without those systems, growth stops immediately. Cancer works the same way. Tumors release chemical signals that tell nearby tissues to begin constructing blood vessel networks specifically designed to feed them. Once that happens, growth accelerates rapidly. One of the primary signals responsible for this process is something called vascular endothelial growth factor, commonly shortened to VEGF. Cancer cells use this protein like a biological construction order. VEGF tells the body, build more blood vessels here. Once those vessels arrive, the tumor suddenly gains access to unlimited nutrients and oxygen. At that point, what began as a microscopic abnormality can expand aggressively in a very short period of time. And this is where curcumin becomes so remarkable. Researchers discovered that curcumin appears capable of interfering directly with VEGF signaling. In simple terms, it helps block the tumor's ability to request its blood supply. Imagine shutting down the delivery routes to a rapidly growing city before construction can even begin. Without those new blood vessels, cancer cells struggle to expand beyond early stages of development. But that's only one layer of what scientists observed. Every healthy cell in your body contains an emergency self-destruct system known as apoptosis. This is one of the body's most important protective mechanisms. When a cell becomes severely damaged, mutated, or dangerous, it's supposed to activate this internal shutdown process and die before causing harm. Cancer cells, however, learn how to disable that system. They ignore the body's normal rules for destruction and continue multiplying uncontrollably. Curcumin appears to reactivate parts of that shutdown pathway. In laboratory studies involving colorectal cancer cells, researchers observed that curcumin encouraged abnormal cells to undergo apoptosis while leaving healthy surrounding tissue largely unaffected. That distinction matters enormously. Many aggressive cancer treatments damage both healthy and unhealthy cells simultaneously. But curcumin demonstrated something different in experimental settings: selective pressure against abnormal cancerous cells without widespread destruction of normal tissue. Scientists also discovered another important mechanism involving inflammation and immune evasion. Cancer cells often hijack inflammatory pathways to help themselves survive. One major pathway involves a protein complex called NF-kappa B. This protein acts almost like a master control switch for inflammation and immune signaling inside the body. When overactivated, it can help cancer cells hide from immune attack and resist destruction. Curcumin has repeatedly shown the ability to suppress NF-kappa B activity in experimental models. In some research settings, cancer cells exposed to curcumin lost much of their ability to shield themselves from immune detection. Essentially, the protective camouflage began breaking down. Now, this is where many people become skeptical. And honestly, skepticism is healthy. Whenever natural compounds are discussed online, exaggerated claims often follow. But what makes this conversation different is the amount of serious scientific investigation involved. Researchers from multiple institutions have examined curcumin using tissue analysis, microbiome sequencing, laboratory cancer models, and human clinical trials. One particularly important study involved adults considered at elevated risk for colorectal cancer because they had already developed precancerous polyps previously removed during colonoscopy procedures. Participants received concentrated curcumin daily for 1 month. Afterward, tissue samples from the colon were analyzed for abnormal precancerous formations. Researchers found measurable reductions in these early cellular abnormalities within the tissue itself. Not survey answers, not subjective feelings, actual microscopic tissue changes. Another study focused on individuals with a rare inherited condition, causing the colon to produce large numbers of precancerous polyps over time. After several months of curcumin combined with absorption-enhancing compounds, researchers documented substantial reductions in both polyp number and size. In a condition where surgery is often considered unavoidable, those findings drew serious attention within the research community. Meanwhile, microbiome-focused studies continued showing similar patterns. Harmful inflammatory bacteria decreased, while beneficial bacterial populations associated with immune protection increased. Different institutions, different methodologies, yet the same overall direction kept appearing again and again. But despite all this promising research, there's one enormous problem most people never hear about, and it explains why millions of people using turmeric experience almost no meaningful biological benefit whatsoever. The issue is absorption. Because curcumin, in its natural form, is absorbed extremely poorly by the human digestive system. In fact, standard absorption rates are so low that most of the compound simply passes through the body without ever reaching therapeutic concentrations in the bloodstream, which means the way most people are using turmeric right now is practically useless. This is the moment where most people realize they've been using turmeric completely the wrong way for years. They sprinkle a little into a smoothie, stir some into tea once in a while, maybe swallow a cheap supplement capsule from the pharmacy shelf, and assume they're getting all the benefits they've heard about online. But biologically, almost none of that curcumin is actually reaching the tissues where it matters most. And the reason comes down to one frustrating reality about human digestion. Curcumin is notoriously difficult for the body to absorb. Scientists studying pharmacokinetics, the way compounds move through the body, discovered that standard curcumin absorption is incredibly low. In many cases, less than 1% of what you consume successfully enters the bloodstream in a usable form. Think about what that means practically. If research studies showing meaningful effects are using gram-level doses of curcumin, but your body absorbs almost none of it, then the tiny amount in your occasional turmeric latte is biologically insignificant. It's like pouring buckets of water onto dry soil while a drain underneath carries nearly all of it away before the ground can absorb anything. The compound itself is powerful, but the delivery system fails. That's why so many people try turmeric for months and notice absolutely nothing. The science wasn't necessarily wrong. The preparation method was incomplete. But researchers eventually discovered something fascinating. One simple ingredient dramatically changes the entire equation: black pepper. Inside black pepper is an active compound called piperine. Piperine temporarily blocks certain digestive enzymes responsible for breaking down curcumin too quickly inside the intestines and liver. When curcumin is paired with piperine, far more of it survives digestion long enough to cross into circulation. And the increase isn't small. Multiple studies documented absorption increases approaching 2,000% simply by combining curcumin with black pepper. Not 20%, not 50%, thousands. That means the difference between turmeric alone and turmeric paired correctly is the difference between trace exposure and meaningful biological activity. But there's another layer most people still miss. Curcumin is fat-soluble. That means it dissolves and travels far more effectively when consumed alongside dietary fats. Olive oil, avocado, eggs, nuts, fatty fish, coconut oil, these foods help escort curcumin through a separate absorption pathway that bypasses some of the body's normal breakdown systems. Without fat, absorption remains weak. Without black pepper, absorption collapses even further, which means the true therapeutic combination isn't turmeric by itself. It's turmeric plus black pepper plus fat together consistently over time. And this is exactly where many traditional cultures unknowingly got it right centuries ago. Turmeric was rarely eaten alone. It was commonly cooked into oils, curries, egg dishes, soups, and warm fat-containing meals, naturally paired with spices like black pepper. Modern wellness culture simplified turmeric into powders and drinks while accidentally removing the very conditions that made it effective. Now let's make this practical, because information only matters if you can actually use it. The goal isn't perfection, the goal is consistency. Researchers studying microbiome changes repeatedly observed that smaller daily exposure produced stronger long-term effects than large doses taken randomly once in a while. Your gut bacteria respond to patterns. Repetition matters more than occasional extremes. So imagine starting the morning with a properly prepared golden drink. Warm, unsweetened almond milk or oat milk, gently heated, not boiled aggressively. Add 1 teaspoon of quality turmeric powder, freshly cracked black pepper, and a small amount of olive oil or coconut oil. Optional ginger and cinnamon improve both flavor and anti-inflammatory potential. That single preparation creates an entirely different biological effect compared to turmeric alone. Then, breakfast becomes another opportunity. Scrambled eggs cooked in olive oil with turmeric and pepper mixed directly into them. Or oatmeal prepared with almond butter, turmeric, cinnamon, and black pepper stirred in while cooking. Most people expect turmeric to taste strange in these meals, but when balanced properly, it creates warmth and depth that actually improves flavor. Lunch becomes easy because turmeric blends naturally into soups, lentils, grain bowls, broths, and salad dressings. A simple olive oil dressing with apple cider vinegar, turmeric, and pepper takes less than 2 minutes to make and works with almost any vegetables. Dinner continues the same pattern. Roasted vegetables coated lightly in olive oil, turmeric, black pepper, and sea salt. Fish or chicken seasoned directly with turmeric before cooking. Lentils simmered with spices. Nothing extreme, nothing unrealistic. Just repeated exposure, creating repeated microbial pressure inside the gut environment. And that's important because your microbiome adapts continuously to what you repeatedly feed it. Beneficial bacteria flourish under certain dietary conditions. Harmful inflammatory bacteria flourish under others. Every meal becomes either reinforcement for protection or reinforcement for inflammation. What's especially fascinating is that curcumin doesn't simply suppress harmful bacteria. Research suggests it may simultaneously encourage growth of beneficial strains like lactobacillus and bifidobacterium bacteria associated with healthier immune regulation and reduced inflammation inside the colon. So instead of destroying the ecosystem indiscriminately, curcumin appears to reshape it selectively. And the longer scientists studied these microbial shifts, the more they began noticing something deeply important. People at highest colorectal cancer risk often shared the same patterns of disrupted gut ecology long before cancer was ever diagnosed. Which means by the time symptoms appear, the internal microbial war may have already been happening silently for years. Here's what many people still don't realize about colon cancer risk. It's not only about age, it's not only about genetics, and it's definitely not only about what happens during a colonoscopy appointment every few years. Long before doctors ever discover a tumor, certain people are already living inside biological conditions that quietly increase the probability of cancer development year after year. And most of them have no idea it's happening. One of the biggest risk factors is repeated antibiotic exposure. Antibiotics can absolutely save lives when used appropriately, but they also create massive collateral damage inside the gut microbiome. Imagine a forest fire moving through an ecosystem. Harmful organisms die, but so do many protective species responsible for maintaining balance. After multiple antibiotic cycles, bacterial diversity often drops significantly. Once that protective diversity disappears, opportunistic inflammatory bacteria suddenly have open territory to colonize. This matters because beneficial bacteria do far more than help digestion. They regulate inflammation, strengthen the intestinal barrier, produce short-chain fatty acids that nourish colon cells, and communicate directly with the immune system. When those populations collapse, harmful strains gain influence quickly. Researchers studying microbiome patterns repeatedly observed that lower bacterial diversity often correlates with increased inflammatory signaling throughout the colon. Over years, chronic inflammation damages tissue integrity and creates an environment where abnormal cells survive more easily. That means someone who has taken repeated antibiotics over the past decade may unknowingly be carrying a microbiome far more vulnerable to inflammatory imbalance than they realize. Another major high-risk group includes people with inflammatory bowel diseases like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. These conditions involve persistent inflammation directly affecting the intestinal lining itself. When tissue remains inflamed continuously for years, cellular turnover accelerates. And anytime cells divide rapidly under inflammatory stress, the opportunity for DNA damage increases. This is one reason long-term inflammatory bowel disease significantly raises colorectal cancer risk over time. What's interesting is that curcumin has been studied specifically within inflammatory bowel disease models because of its effects on inflammatory pathways like NF-kappa B. Researchers became interested in whether reducing inflammatory signaling could help protect the intestinal environment itself. Then there are individuals with a family history of colorectal cancer or previous precancerous polyps. This group deserves special attention because polyps are often the bridge between chronic inflammation and eventual cancer formation. Certain polyps remain harmless, but others slowly accumulate mutations over years. The earlier inflammatory pressure begins, the longer abnormal cellular environments have to develop. And this is where prevention becomes incredibly important. Most people imagine cancer prevention as something dramatic or extreme, but the reality is often far more ordinary. Prevention usually looks like repeated daily decisions that slightly shift biology in a healthier direction over very long periods of time. That's what makes microbiome science so powerful. Because unlike genetics, the gut environment is constantly changing. Every meal sends signals into that ecosystem. Some foods nourish inflammatory bacteria associated with toxin production and immune suppression. Others support microbial strains linked to healthier immune balance and reduced intestinal irritation. Your body is adapting continuously, whether you notice it or not. This is why consistency matters far more than occasional healthy eating phases. A single turmeric-rich meal won't transform your microbiome overnight, but repeated exposure across weeks and months creates measurable environmental pressure inside the colon. And according to emerging evidence, those microbial shifts can begin surprisingly quickly. In some studies, beneficial bacterial populations increased within 2 weeks of consistent curcumin exposure. Harmful inflammatory strains decreased, while healthier microbial diversity improved, not because of magic. Because bacteria respond rapidly to available nutrients and environmental conditions. But there's another reason this conversation matters so much right now. Modern lifestyles have created microbiomes very different from those humans historically carried. Ultra-processed foods, chronic stress, poor sleep, low fiber intake, excessive sugar, environmental toxins, sedentary behavior, repeated antibiotics. All of these factors influence microbial composition. Many people today are living with chronic low-grade inflammation without ever feeling obviously sick. And chronic inflammation is dangerous precisely because it's silent. You don't necessarily wake up one morning feeling colon inflammation happening inside your body. The process unfolds below the threshold of sensation for years. Meanwhile, inflammatory bacteria continue producing toxins, weakening the intestinal barrier, and altering immune signaling gradually over time. That's why by the time symptoms appear, bleeding, pain, unexplained weight loss, bowel habit changes, the biological process has often been underway for a decade or longer. This is also why relying only on symptoms is such a dangerous strategy. The body whispers long before it screams. And while no single food or spice should ever be viewed as a miracle cure, certain compounds clearly influence biological pathways involved in inflammation, bacterial balance, oxidative stress, and immune regulation. Curcumin appears to affect all four simultaneously. But there's one final piece most people still overlook completely. The microbiome does not respond to occasional effort. It responds to repeated patterns. That means the people who maintain healthier gut ecosystems into their 60-sec and 70-secs are usually not doing anything extreme. They are simply reinforcing protective habits consistently over years while avoiding behaviors that repeatedly feed inflammation. At the end of all this research, the most important lesson is surprisingly simple. Colon cancer usually does not appear overnight. It develops slowly through years of inflammation, microbial imbalance, and silent cellular damage happening deep inside the gut long before symptoms ever appear. And that means prevention is not one giant action. It's small biological decisions repeated consistently over time. For the next 30 days, keep it simple. Add turmeric to 2 or 3 meals every single day. Always combine it with freshly cracked black pepper and a healthy fat source like olive oil, eggs, avocado, nuts, or fish. Morning golden milk, turmeric eggs, soups, roasted vegetables, simple dressings. The exact meal matters less than the consistency behind it, because your microbiome is listening to what you repeatedly feed it. Within weeks, Research suggests harmful inflammatory bacteria begin losing ground, while beneficial protective strains become stronger. Quiet changes start happening beneath the surface long before you ever feel them. Your gut is not fixed. Your internal environment is changing every single day. If this video changed how you think about gut health and cancer prevention, subscribe now, share this with someone you care about, and watch the next video where we uncover the hidden gut bacteria that control your immune system's ability to destroy cancer cells before tumors ever form.